Today on the Mission 43 podcast, we have Joanne and Chris Collins, an absolute banger of a power couple that's new here to Idaho, here to talk about and teach us about transitioning and planning for your life after the military. Welcome to the Mission 43 podcast, a podcast dedicated to discussing the struggles and triumphs of transitioning to life after the military. I'm Dan Nelson. I'm a former Army Special Forces officer who's personally experienced the challenges of transitioning to civilian life. In every episode, we'll be sharing tips, strategies, and real-life stories of veterans and their families who've chosen Idaho for their life after the military. So join us, and let's start the conversation. Welcome, Collins is Chris and Joanne. You guys have been here in Idaho all of a year?
A year.
In a couple weeks, yeah. In a couple weeks, it'll be a year.
But who's counting?
No one.
So, not native to Idaho, you guys met way back in the day. Well, I was going to say, how do I say it without dating it? Chris was really old, and you were 6, I believe, when you met.
Yes.
And then, but where'd you guys meet?
At Fort Hood, actually. Chris was at his first duty station, and a set of our friends introduced us, and that was just about what happened.
It's an unusual military story. I married the person I met at my first duty station, which
Totally
is
bizarre.
unheard of in military circles. But
Well, where are you from originally, Chris?
so I'm an Army brat, so all over. But I claim San Antonio as my home. Those are my formative years.
Okay.
So I'm a San Antonio native up until a year ago, and now I'm an Idaho native.
Oh, okay. You're just presenting the title to yourself?
As soon as I switched over my cell phone, my new area code, I claim it.
That's a good thing to do nowadays. Not many people do that. But so you ended up going to the West Point, right?
I did. So to add on a layering, I enlisted out of high school. So at the age of 17, Army recruiter came around and said, "Would you like to join the Army?" Initially, I was uber excited about it, and my excitement only intensified when she offered Jack in the Box.
Oh,
so
nice.
she got a buddy in mine, and we ended up enlisting in the Army at age 17. Both my mom and his mom signed us away, and then we enlisted. About a year and a half in, I decided that I wanted to go to West Point, and I was fortunate enough to go to West Point and get commissioned from there.
Very cool. So this is pre-Joanne.
Pre-Joanne.
PJ,
if
I
you will.
refer to. So after West Point, then you commission, and you were a field artillery officer, right?
Almost. Same color, different branch. So I was a combat engineer.
Oh, there you go.
And so I was a combat engineer, so commissioned in 2003, which was an interesting time because we commissioned going to OBC, and we knew we were going to go to Iraq. Mm-hmm. And ended up meeting my first unit, downrange in Iraq. Interesting time. The majority of the fighting and the movement up there was complete, and we transitioned to a different fight. But combat engineer, and we did that. And as a combat engineer, lots of opportunities to do a lot of different things. Yeah. Both high intensity conflict and then also building, which I found incredibly enjoyable.
Did you actually get to exercise that piece in Iraq?
Both of those.
Oh, really?
Both those pieces.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. So before that first deployment, because that's a similar story to a lot of folks that served in that time, like as soon as you get through your initial training, like you're going and meeting your unit. Had you met Joanne already?
I had not. I deployed out of Fort Hood to Iraq twice. Mm-hmm. So through some mutual friends, I ended up meeting Joanne upon my return.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then you met this weirdo. He's what, like a first lieutenant at the time?
Second
Second
lieutenant? Yeah, I think it's
sweet.
second lieutenant at the time.
Still hanging in, like get one for the big bucks there. So second lieutenant Collins is there, and then you guys meet. And what were you doing at that time?
I was working finance. Was I a branch manager of finance? I think it was just about to become a branch manager for a finance company at the time.
So you already been around the block. You have your own professional career.
I do.
And you threw it. Well, I mean, yeah, not what I meant, but yeah, like professionally, you were already on track for like your own success, and then you met this weirdo.
I did. He was a surprise. So it was my son and I, and we were just hanging out, and we met, and he He said, I asked him, I said, so where'd you go to school? And he said, a school in New York. And I said, which one? He said, West Point. And I said, take me home. And he's like, no, I'm really okay. So we had a second and a third date after that. And I figured we'd try it out.
There you go. So no Army guys for you down there. And were you in Killeen?
We weren't. I was in Killeen.
So you knew like your way around to how to navigate that and all the military guys.
Well, my dad was military.
Oh, gotcha.
So I grew up around military posts.
Okay.
And so my grandfather's military, my dad was military, always lived on a post at the time. Graduated high school in Killeen, then moved away and then came back. So I'd been around military guys for a while.
So just saying, so you met when Chris was a second lieutenant.
Right.
And he just retired, 6 months ago?
No. I retired a month and 45 days ago.
Oh, sweet, officially. But you did Skill Bridge or something?
I did the Skill Bridge program.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, and that was a great transition for us. But yeah,
20 years though. You guys, at least 20 more than that, right? Of military service together.
Yep.
So more than 20 years together. And then what? From someone from Texas and someone from everywhere. Mm-hmm. What brought you to Idaho?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's a lot of layers to that, and to look at that, it really goes back to 2009. So I was at the Corps of Engineers, mm-hmm. and I got the opportunity to do recruiting command here in Idaho.
Oh, really?
However, I didn't know I was coming to Idaho. I was told I was going to Salt Lake City Recruiting Battalion.
Perfect. We're way better here.
Yeah, so I called up my replacement, or he called me and said, "Hey, you're replacing me." And I said, "Where are you from?" He said, "Boise, Idaho." And I said, "The heck you are." Or the heck I am, I should say. So I told my wife about it, and she said, "Where's Idaho again?" Mm-hmm. And so I don't want to say we came here begrudgingly, but we were expecting Salt Lake, and we ended up here, ended up thriving. Yep. We from 2010 to 2012, we fell in love with this. And I think what's really reticent to us is our first week here. When we were at a Walmart, and we had our middle child, Madison, and she was, of course, newborn.
She was only 8 weeks.
Newbornish, yeah.
Who's counting?
Yeah, who's counting? And she was throwing a usual fit. She throws those fits even now, but throwing a fit, and all of a sudden, a woman who was standing in line behind us ended up unbuckling her and picking her up. And much to the chagrin of my wife, and what did she say to you?
I was a little nervous. We had just come from Houston. And
right.
Now, and she was an older woman. She said, "I'm a grandma. You just go ahead, and I will just pick up the baby and take care of the baby." And I think my heart stopped right about then as this woman was taking my child out of the car seat while I was trying to maneuver some things, and she just went to start talking to me about her grandkids and all the things and everything. And she asked me how long we'd been in Idaho, and we had just been here for we're talking 2 weeks, and it was so welcoming.
That's cool.
And I don't think we'd ever lived at a place where all of a sudden it was instant for us. Both of us born and raised military. Both of us had spent our lives traveling around, and in that moment, it felt like home. And then for the next 2 years, we just kept having those kind of situations where it felt like home. We'd go to things, and it felt like we were supposed to be here.
Well, it's pretty cool to see, the culture of Idaho actually attracting the people that we hope,
right.
come here. Service-minded people that, community-minded people that are willing to pick up someone's random baby that's crying in a store. Yeah. Although, for the record, I did that in Cabela's a couple of years ago, and it did not go well for me. So
I can imagine.
Yeah, it's weird. But so that was midway through your career then?
Midway, yeah.
And then you guys continue on in military life. You're growing your family. And how many kids do you guys have now?
4.
Okay, so you've grown your family throughout this whole period. You're moving all over the country. Were you guys ever stationed overseas?
We were never stationed overseas together.
Yeah.
No. So we've been staying CONUS or
minus deployments and whatnot.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Sure. And then so you're still working at that time, right?
I worked. I think I went to Boise State. Actually, I graduated from Boise State in 2000. I know, right? In 2012. So I took a period of time where I went back to school.
Okay.
Much like a lot of military wives, we join and we serve, and then we have children and we want to go back and do other things. So I went, while we were here in Boise, I went to Boise State, got my degrees while we were here. And then when we moved again to Leavenworth, got a master's while I was there.
Oh, no big deal?
Not at all. And so was able to work and pick up education at the same time because his tempo was allowing me to do that.
Right. And then you actually served in like the Delta Force of Nerds for the latter part of your career, correct?
That's correct. It's considered the special forces of the non-operational
I wouldn't
side.
go right. Okay.
So I had the opportunity. So as a combat engineer, nerdy in and of itself, they're the nerds of the infantry, if you will.
Is that what we're going with?
Okay.
So as a combat engineer, I thoroughly enjoy what I did.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate to be in both tactical, through operational, through institutional type units. And so I got to see that broad swath of what the Army had to offer.
Yeah.
I was given the opportunity then to move to an area that not a lot of people are familiar with, and it's called a functional area.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very specific area, and they have different specialties. And the specialty I chose was called an ORSA, or an Operational Research System Analyst. And what that's a smart way of saying, besides a cool naming acronym.
I thought that was a killer whale.
An orca? Yes. Orca ORSAs. So what that is a data analyst for the Army. And what it ultimately comes down to being is that no person and no commander, no leader should be making decisions based on what they see alone. If you look back on the book Moneyball, or the movie For You, the difference between a batter that bats 300 and a batter that bats 270, world of difference, but that's only one hit every 3 weeks. So what the eye sees and what we can document, my job was to discern that for the commander so that he could see what was between those numbers, and then ultimately make decisions. So
that's a lot of words for saying I love spreadsheets.
I do love spreadsheets.
Yes, and you also said that like no commander can make a decision on things they see alone without analyzing the data, but we do all the time.
Sure, right. At the end of the day, it's a commander's gut, and I had to be okay when I switched from a combat engineer to an ORSA that I no longer make decisions. I inform decisions, and I can provide all the analysis and an entire playbook. And at the end of the day, the commander will say, I'm going with option C. And I have to be okay with that.
How did you deal with that, like just ego-wise?
It was easier to do because I think that much like in the Army, I didn't have to blaze my own trail. That ORSAs have been around, and there's a great training program for us to be able to provide a military application of how we do these decisions, and then how to not be a pain in the butt for commanders, but really provide value to them, provide them a value proposition. So it was the path was blazed before me.
Well, congratulations on the new Army Combat Fitness Test. That went super well. And for everyone watching, like Chris was the architect of that, recommended its implementation and all the subsequent changes.
That's right. There's still going to be a year trial period to get the APFT back on.
Good.
Yeah, yep. Money well spent.
Yeah, perfect. And ACUs, again, thank you. And Joanne, throughout this whole time, I mentioned like a little bit at the very beginning, but you're a teacher now.
I'm a teacher now.
But you were in finance and HR?
HR. So that's what I went back to Boise State to get a degree in, was HR. And then when we moved to Leavenworth, Kansas, I got an MBA when I moved there so that they would tie together so I could understand the business side of the house as well as the human resources side.
Man, you guys have some smart kids, I guarantee that.
I think they're smarter than I am, really. And then switched over to education almost 3 years ago.
Well, how did that happen? Because you were not, you certainly weren't at the bottom of the HR world when you made the switch over.
No, COVID happened.
That whole thing.
Yeah. COVID shut down. We were in New Mexico, and much like everywhere else, COVID shut down a lot. The schools in New Mexico were closed almost 18 months. When they opened back up again, when I say closed, I mean they were full virtual for that period of time. I know that's not how it was up here in Idaho, but that's how it was down there in New Mexico. When they opened back up, there was a massive teacher shortage. A lot of the more experienced teachers had decided to retire. Some of them just decided to leave the profession because there was a lot going on.
Yeah.
And so the school district had put out an email to parents saying, hey, look, we could really use some subs. Applied to be a substitute teacher. Every once in a while, what I told my husband was, I could just do this a couple days a week. Go in there, not a problem.
While you're doing your other job, though.
Yes, I was still an HR director for an ABA clinic in New York. I was just doing it remotely.
Wow.
And went in through the interview process, and they have a program in New Mexico where if you already have a degree, it didn't really matter what field it was in.
Yeah.
You could go back to school, get additional credits, 21, and get your teacher certification. So through the interview process to become a substitute, they told me about it. But I wasn't really interested in it. I thought I would just help out because I'm a business person, not a teacher.
Right.
So I thought. And then before I even started, on my first day of becoming a substitute, they called me and said, would you mind doing an extended, a long-term sub position for a couple weeks? In the classroom, I was going to go sub in the following day, basically. Said, sure, not a problem. I don't mind. Did that for a couple weeks when HR called me and said, are you interested in any way to become the permanent teacher in that classroom? And, oh, by the way, you have to do the 21 credit hours that they told me about a few weeks earlier. And by this point, I had already basically fallen in love with the students in the classroom, and said, sure, let's do it. And then decided, well, I'm still going to be an HR person. I'll just do it this year. Started as a full-time student while teaching in a classroom full-time and having a position as the director of HR at a clinic in New York.
And 4 kids.
And at the time, 3, because our oldest one is now stationed in Alaska. He's active duty also.
Okay.
So
what is it then? Because not everyone's cut out to be a teacher. There's a lot of people.
Everyone's ever cut out to be a teacher.
You think everyone is?
I think everyone can find a place in education. Maybe not in the classroom. Maybe that's not their calling, to be in a classroom with 20 or 25 kids. There's always a place in education for everybody, though. There's volunteer positions. There's behind-the-scene operation positions. I mean, they have positions that are business positions within a school system. So I think everybody can work in education. Not everybody chooses to be a teacher, but everybody can work together in education.
Well, it's a service mindset, that's for sure. Seems like anyone that works in the education field, and I think it's a big miss on a lot of veterans organizations and whatnot that we, always talk about moving on to the next career. But a lot of people, we see it from our surveys at Mission 43 of all our members. One of the most popular responses, and when asked the question, like, what are you most worried about? It's a loss of purpose and a loss of community,
Right.
And that purpose comes, often through acts of service and feeling like you're of value to the community. And certainly I would hope that, teachers feel that way. But I don't think that everyone's cut out to teach. And I'm kind of curious, like when you started that period, you say you started as a sub, and you did like long-term 2 weeks.
Right.
Doesn't seem very long-term to me, but yeah.
It wasn't in retrospect.
That's how long I lasted most of my jobs anyway. But I'm curious, like when did you find that you had a gift for it?
I think I have a task. I'm a task-oriented person. So if
checklists, spreadsheets.
Well, he does checklists and spreadsheets. Give me a task and I can get it done to the very end. It works well together because he creates the spreadsheet, he creates his commander intent, and then I just go do it. So it kind of how it works for us. But I think back to your question again. Sorry, I got distracted. I think I didn't know. So here's absolutely true story. I decided to become this long-term sub. I called my very best friend who's in New York. She is the polar opposite of me.
She's terrible, awful.
No, she is an amazing person who has so much energy, right? And I called her and I said, Renee, this is what I'm going to go do. And you know what she said to me? She said, why? You barely like your own kids. Why would you want to go and teach other people's children?
It's a fair question.
And it is a fair question because even when I went through college, education was not anything that I said. I said business, numbers. I am going to sculpt change through business. And when I walked into the classroom, and it took a couple weeks of realizing that you're trying to make 25 people do what you want them to do all at the same time.
Right.
But once I figured out how to kind of maneuver that, I realized that the students really wanted what I had to give them.
Which is what?
I think they wanted structure, which that is what I am. I'm a very structured person. They wanted structure. They wanted someone to listen to them. They wanted someone to educate them. But that's every teacher's job, right? That's every person. That's a parent's job, is to educate their students. I mean, their children. But I think what I brought was a worldly perspective. So in Las Cruces, everybody they knew had grown up in Las Cruces.
Yep.
That was their window. And here comes someone who I lived in Germany. I'd visited Poland. I brought pictures of Italy, And I think what I learned during that is I was like, oh, they need me. But it took halfway through the school year to realize that I needed them too. They taught me as much in that year, I think, as I taught them. And I know, I taught them reading and writing and math. But what they taught me is that I could give back to my community in a different way. Mm-hmm. I didn't have to be the HR director sitting in my office working with my small pod of people. I could shape lives every day. And if you put it a grand thought, is I'm teaching them to be leaders and to be productive members of the community 10 years from now. And I'm doing that today to help them do that.
Do you think most teachers, honestly feel that same sense of duty and responsibility?
I think they do. I think that the system sometimes gets a little muddled.
Sure.
Education, I think, and people always have a bunch of opinions about we should do this, we should do that. And I think...
Yes, I do.
And everybody has one, and they're all great opinions. But I think, because everybody brings a different perspective, right? And I think everybody's opinion, but then what you have is you have a whole bunch of opinions. So then you need people that are going to take that and do something with it. Yeah. And I think that's where teachers, they go into the profession saying that I want to do that. And I think sometimes we get weighed down with all the red tape and all that other stuff. But if you just peel it away and walk into the classroom every day with a mindset of, my attitude, the way that I walk into my classroom is going to shape their day. It's going to shape their perspective. It shapes their opinion of school.
Right.
So if I can change a student's mindset on math, what I hear every single year is, I hate math. I'm not good at math.
Yep.
And I look at every one of them and go, you are absolutely good at math. You just haven't had anybody speak your language. Mm-hmm. So let me find your language. And I think my passion ignites a passion in them.
Yep. Well, that's true. Your passion is contagious, and I think that's one of the things that draws so many of our members to both of you guys. Mostly Joanne, obviously.
Yeah.
But I'm curious now because, you guys are in the midst of retirement, really.
Yep.
You are the prototypical couple that we would hope comes to Mission 43 to help transition to civilian life here in Idaho with you both and your family. Do you feel like you're transitioning now?
So I think our transition wasn't necessarily atypical. I think it was deliberate. Certainly as we started this process, and again, I think we've always had the intention to come back to Idaho. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, you limit your options. And someone told me that when you retire, you're looking at occupation, location, or compensation. Mm-hmm. And certainly we chose a location. So that was first and foremost on our minds. So I think we had a goal in mind, and that was to retire in Idaho for a variety of reasons. One, the vibrant community, the outdoor life, and then the attitudes for the veteran community definitely appealed to us. In terms of our planning process, we laid it out and we started planning in advance.
This should be no surprise with a spreadsheet guy, right?
Well, or you either, yeah.
So we were more than willing. We solicited a lot of advice from people.
Everybody.
Again, right, because we can vicariously learn through other folks in terms of what they did and work for them. Yeah. And then we had the benefit of being able to sift through that and say what applied to us.
Yeah. And I think what we also did is we had Mission 43 to help us. Yeah. So when we decided it was getting time close for retirement, we used our network here to say, we're looking to buy a house. And our network helped us find our home, a year and a half, almost 2 years before retirement.
Yeah. That's huge.
Yeah, definitely the pillars have a great deal to play with that. And we certainly tapped into each one of those. And it's because each member of the Mission 43 family really has done it. And although your expertise may not reside in every avenue, certainly you guys are subject matter expertise in each of them. In terms of the educational pillar, Joe certainly took advantage of that in terms of learning from, taking advantage of listening to the podcasts, in terms of taking advantage of the opportunities and reaching out to those leaders there. In terms of the employment, even though I felt comfortable in my skills when I was transitioning out, there was still a great sense of ease that the transition team can walk me through this and say, hey, take a deep breath. This is how your skills translate, and you're going to be okay. And if anything, someone who's done that before can walk you through that, provide you comfort is value in and of itself.
I don't think that I feel like we're transitioning anymore. I feel I got here 9 months before Chris did.
Yeah.
So I moved the girls up. We got the girls settled in school. Mm-hmm. I started my job. So we kind of did our transition in two separate transitions, if you will. Broke it up. The girls and I transitioned first.
Yeah.
And then Chris was able to transition from the military.
I mean, that's a huge commitment in itself for any couple, any family to say, like, hey, we're deliberately going to separate here for this period of time to make things better overall.
And I think, again, it's sort of a microcosm in terms of our relationship and how we've had to discuss, communicate, and then going back to intent, this is what our goal is, and then we're going to execute violently in order to achieve that. So when we started to do this, and Joe says it was two separate times, it's really two different phases. Yeah. And what it allowed me to do is by getting Joe moved here, established here, she was able to start working, kids were able to start school, establish that. It allowed me to work individually on my own transition. So when I went from station to station, part of the transition journey, I could just worry about myself. Mm-hmm. And I think the Army taught us how to do that. Whenever you deploy, they square away the family first so that when you deploy, you can only focus on yourself. The Army's good institutionally about that. And I think we use that model to set us up. So the transition, and Joe saying this, has been fairly smooth because...
Simple for us.
Simple because it was spread out, and we can, spread the pain as opposed to all at once.
I think it's remarkable because you guys both are such like high achievers, objectively successful in everything that you've done so far in your lives, whether it's parenting, career-wise, military-wise, all those things. But your humility seems to be like one of your greatest strengths, both of you.
Really?
Individually and as a couple, yeah. Especially Chris, I would say, I know, right?
Okay, I know I am.
I'm the best at being humble.
That's true. But I mean, really, it takes a certain level of humility to say, like, I need to talk to somebody that's already been there and done that. Right. And I will listen and heed that advice. Or I will take advantage of this opportunity that's free, by the way, and things like Mission 43. Whereas you have dumbasses like me that didn't do that. And it was because of a lack of humility, because I'm like, well, I don't believe in networking. If I'm good enough, I'll make it on my own. I know how to write a resume. I've written plenty of resumes. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right.
And it's weird in transition and how someone like me flounders for so long until you get humbled enough to finally be like, okay, I will listen now. But you guys started off that way. Have you always been like that as a couple?
I would say it's definitely learned in terms of listening to each other and different perspectives. So although our styles and attitudes are different, I think we complement each other. And Joe recalls back that the way that she knew that we were a perfect fit was when we went out one of our first dates, and I ordered chicken wings. And it turned out that I like the wing, or I like the drumsticks, and she likes the flappers. And she said, this is perfect. We can, the wings, we can complete an entire order. And that's when we said we knew we complemented each other. That's not to say that, we don't differentiate in terms of...
It seems like we're always, but I'm task-oriented, high-strung, and he's much more laid back. We make jokes about the spreadsheets because that's how his mind thinks, but he will handle things much smoother than I am. I am task, get it done today. And he's like, no, we really have 3 weeks, so let's plan it out. And I'm like, nope, today. And so we've had to learn how to kind of meld those two together.
Yeah.
which is kind of funny because that's how our children are. We have 3 that are very go with the flow and 1 who is her mama.
Oh.
And so we're teaching our children how to do that same thing that we've taken 72 years to do.
72 years, that's right.
Well, if you need any lessons in patience, I'm always available to give some coaching on that. It's one of my strongest suits.
That's one of your strongest suits?
No.
Okay.
You guys have both participated in the Mission 43 Leaders Fellowship. Joanne from Cohort 4.
Yes.
And now you have much greater seniority than the boot here, who's only completed phase 1 of Cohort 5.
He's not really a Leaders Fellow yet until he completes, phase 2.
Exactly, until you got to complete phase 2.
There you go.
It'll probably be his first time ever sleeping out in the woods.
And I completed phase 2 flawlessly with 0 complaints.
That's true. I heard that from your group leaders.
I'm sure that's what they said. That Joanne did not ask how much further do we have to walk.
That's accurate. Well, I can't thank you guys enough for everything you've brought to Idaho. Like, honestly, our community here is better because you and your family are here. And your ability to fit right in, I guess, even though you have that weird Texas sounding talk.
I try to hide it.
It's endearing.
It comes out when I'm mad too, like really, really bad. That's when I get that Southern mama thing going on. Ask my girls.
Well, truly, I think if people that are watching, you guys are very relatable and not necessarily, in spite of your success, you guys still, because of that humility, again, have the ability to relate to almost anybody, and it's pretty cool to see. So thanks for what you're doing for our community as a teacher.
Thank you.
And thank you for what you've done for our country collectively, for both of you guys, and welcome to Idaho.
Well, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us as the official Idaho welcome train.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
No problem.
Thanks for joining us for the Mission 43 podcast. We hope you found it informative and helpful. If you have any questions or feedback, please comment below or email podcast@mission43.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our podcast to stay up to date with new episodes. Be proud of your service, not defined by it. See you next time.